presentation, which is about changing the narrative on resolving crimes without going to court. This comes, I think, a bit around the subject of what we're going to call them, how we're going to badge out-of-court disposals, that awful title, as we welcome Penelope Gibbs, the Director of Transformed Justice. Penelope, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much. So today I'm going to talk about communication, which is obviously critical. How on earth do we talk about these things in a way which is going to buy support from political leaders, the public, potential victims, whoever? And I'm going next. Yeah. So this is just my introductory slide. But first of all, I'd like to go through some of the data behind what Andy was talking about in terms of why we need to increase support. So this is the trends in out-of-court disposals, and you can all have these slides afterwards. What we can see here is this is not the volume. We're taking it from 100% back in 2009 just to show the trends as clearly as possible. And this is government data. And so what you can see is the top line, everything's going down. We know that. This is resolution of crime. It's all going down. So is it the same across the country? Now, this is a slide where we've got a booklet, which is over on that table, which has the full table of forces. And I think what this slide shows is that it's not the same everywhere. And I think that that is critical. What this is the use of charging versus out-of-court disposal. So it's only positive resolutions. It doesn't include NFAs. It does include outcome 22 because we think that that's a positive resolution. So we've included that in. But what you can see is the difference between forces in the proportion of positive resolution, which is charged versus using an out-of-court disposal, is profound. Again, Andy talked about this. Peter talked about this a bit. These are the MOJ figures that come out regularly on proven reoffending. So they're the ones with the biggest numbers. Unfortunately, it doesn't have community resolution, but it does measure caution. And what you can see is, so most of those who might be prosecuted instead of an out-of-court disposal are going to go to that magistrate's court and they're going to get a fine. So the fine is the nearest comparison in terms of reoffending. This data is absolutely consistent with caution being more successful in terms of reoffending than the fine, which is why we need to push it more. Let's go on to the actual subject, which is messaging. So why, given all that positive stuff about reoffending, do we get some incredibly negative media headlines? And every single year, somebody feeds the Telegraph data about serious and violent offences which have had out-of-court disposals, where I suspect it was ones where the victim absolutely refused to cooperate, but that's never in the media stories. So you get a lot of poor media headlines. Do they reflect actually what police officers and the public think? So we've worked with 7 police forces, and in every one we've done a survey of attitudes to out-of-court disposals. And if anybody who hasn't worked with us wants access just to that survey kind of set of questions, we're happy to give it out, and then you can compare it with other forces. So what do police think of out-of-court disposals? Well, we're missing any labels on that, so that's not very helpful. But 45.4 is actually we should use more out-of-court disposals. 20% is used about right, and 9% or 8.8% is we should use fewer. So actually what that shows is police officers want to use more. What we did get to is a phrase which significantly improves understanding. And what you'll see here is that a lot of things that we use have a backfire effect. So diversion is really not understood. And as you know, actually, even within the criminal justice sector, it has a myriad of meanings. So it's not that helpful. Out of court, people think of out of court divorce settlements. And there's a complicated thing about making sure you don't trigger people to be worried. So even though they've got a lot of negativity about court, they also think that it's important that we don't trash court. So any phrase which implies that we're avoiding court, as it were, actually has a backfire effect, as does police-led resolution of crime for the significant minority who distrust police. And then the other element that we tested out is this issue about them having not incredibly vague idea about what goes on out of court. And, you know, it won't surprise you to know it helps to have an example. You can really increase support. So, do you support policies to resolve more crime without going to court? The public said yes. You know, we're on your side broadly. But then, if you actually give them an example, so a woman who may be an alcoholic is arrested for shoplifting, do you support police referring her to a drug and alcohol agency for counselling? Now, interestingly, as you know, this could be outcome 22. It doesn't actually have to be a formal outcome. It could be a conditional caution. It could be a community resolution. It could be any of those. They were just asked, do you support that kind of option for somebody who's been shoplifting? And actually, then you push up the number in favour radically. So you can push up support for out-of-court disposals by using examples. And I would say use plain English. Avoid jargon every single time, because that is what will faze people and certainly lead to a lack of understanding. And that goes with, obviously, victims as well. And I think all this kind of works for conversations with victims. The other thing to say is that it's a truism, but facts do not persuade. Statistics do not persuade. People are persuaded by values. If you think about take back control, and you know, they're kind of what they think about things are based on their belief system. So what we also tested out was what values you can use to make people care about this. And there are two which work really well. One we call pragmatism. It makes sense. It works. That kind of thing. It's explained in our guide. And then the other one is about human potential. People do have a belief in rehabilitation. So if you can persuade them that this, you know, benefits the long-term well-being of that person and society. So I think what we're trying to, you know, the main point we're trying to say here is police forces want to use more. The public are with you latently if you can explain it properly and have a bit more confidence about it. And, you know, I'm going to sort of end there, but what I would say as well is that the full messaging guide is either in the booklet or on our reports thing, but also on our link tree, which is on this pamphlet. So we've put 5 takeaways about out-of-court disposals. There's a QR code. There's a link tree through the QR code. And it's got all the publications that Transform Justice has done all on that link tree. And the other thing I would say communications-wise is we've produced a podcast about out-of-court disposals. And I'm going to stop there for any questions.
The forces recognised as outliers in terms of charges have been so for nearly a decade. Nothing seems to have changed. Who is responsible for resolving this?
You see, I think that it is about, dare I say it, partly the inspectorate. I think if you've got a force where the charging is at 80%, you know, that cannot be effective. We need to look at what cases are going to court and getting these fines and people aren't paying them. And so I think the inspectorate's partly it. It is also about PCCs, I have to say. If I was the PCC in a force where it was 80% charging, I think it's partly their responsibility to say, why are we such an outlier?
Penelope, thank you very much indeed. Please show your appreciation.